Hey, Dean, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Thanks again for having me. As I say, this is a real honor. Background-wise, a long, long time in field sales and field sales management. So I think there were a few dinosaurs that were roaming the earth when I first started. But interesting how I got into sales. I was actually a pivot from wanting to be a lawyer. My father was a
Oh,
lawyer, and I grew up wanting to be a trial lawyer. I felt like I was a pretty persuasive guy, and I loved to perform, and enjoyed watching him do his trial work. And about halfway through college, I walked into his office one day and saw him buried in books. I said, "What in the world are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm doing research." It's about 80 to 90% of my job, at least back then. I went, "Oh boy, okay, I got to think of something else." So yeah, so I got the sales bug, actually from my wife's, a future wife's father, who was an executive at Litton, started in sales, and the rest is history. Started with Xerox in professional selling skills and worked all the way up last 20 years with the same company in large enterprise sales. So I've
yep.
enjoyed.
Was it a natural progression from college, or?
Well, it was. I felt attracted to sales, particularly after kind of being around my future father-in-law at the time, and he really got me to appreciate the whole notion of selling, and that it's a real profession, and it's something that he thought I would be good at. So it was a progression through getting input from guys like him, and I'm a people person, so I thought I could do well at it. I really was attracted to everything being different. No two calls are the same, and so from that perspective, I think so. It was a natural progression.
And you're selling some pretty technical stuff. I mean, I was kind of in that space for a while.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. Yes, yes, no, absolutely. I saw your background. I think we come out a little bit out of the same field, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So you're selling to software architects and developers. Is that true?
Yes, I mean that's partially true. I have tended, Brian, to try to do a top-down approach, and when I say top-down, it's really largely chief information officers, CIOs. Even if it's a short call and I get directed down, I like that direction down. Um, and and I think in enterprise sales, you can get pulled into the feature function war, which I'm very careful not to do. And when I speak to our new hire classes, which I've done over the last 7, 8 years from the field, to me, that's a losing proposition. Um, I view myself as a person who solves problems, not who sells products. And that distinction, in my opinion, no matter what you sell, is very important.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys are big players in that space. So what would your approach be going, because the CIO, he's got a lot of problems, right? Or doesn't think he has any problems, one or the other.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spend a lot of time with CIOs. Kind of prided myself on that, and it's fairly interesting because I really know the ones who have done a very good job at connecting to the business. I can tell fairly early on, probably in 10 or 15 minutes, those that have really connected to the business. And I ask them, I think for salespeople out there that are selling into technology, one good question I always ask is, how much of your time do you spend with business leaders? And it's an interesting response. And I find the ones that are more on the leading edge of innovation, certainly going through digital transformations, things like that, usually spend about 70 or 80% of their time with the business.
Yeah. And what do you think differentiates you from other salespeople?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they know that I care. I very much take a outside in view of selling. My questions, which I like TED questions. Tell me, explain to me, describe for me. So I tell when I'm very big believer in TED questions, as I call them. Um, they know that I'm interested in them. I think a lot of salespeople make mistakes in going too quickly. Everybody's too impatient these days. So I say, have a little patience, understand their business, understand their products. How do they sell? How do they differentiate their products that they sell from their competition?
Yeah.
Where have they done that before? Provide me an example of how you differentiate, things like that. And so you really get an appreciation for what they go through, an empathy. And then you internalize that, you get passionate about that, and then the rest kind of just evolves.
Yeah. It sounds a little bit like trial attorney.
It does, yeah. Yeah,
Well,
well, I think one of the things I hear you talk a lot about, and I believe in very deeply, is we are in a performance business.
well, people misunderstand that like we're singing and dancing. No, it's how well you're doing it,
Yeah.
not just that you do it. Because today people count the activities and they look at the results and everyone ignores what goes on in the middle.
Well, and that's right. I spent 14 of my years were in sales management. I enjoyed that too. I enjoyed both. I'm not the kind of guy that in those 14 years when I was managing, I spent very little time looking at spreadsheets and computer things. And I always say quality over quantity. The metric to me when I was managing and when I drive myself from a sales perspective is, am I doing quality things within the context of the focus accounts that I'm on? And if you're just going through the motions and saying, oh, I did, 100 calls today and 10% of those answered my call and one scheduled an appointment. Okay, that's great. You could get to the end of the year and there's nothing on the scoreboard.
Right.
So quality over quantity, and whether you're an individual salesperson or a manager, challenge yourself, inspect yourself. Are you moving? I'm big on analogies. Are you moving the ball down the field? Are you progressing it? Accounts, opportunities, they oftentimes largely don't know how to buy.
Of course, they know, because how would they know how to buy unless they've done it before and done it recently before?
Yeah. And the reality are I sell 7-figure deals. I mean, in my 20 years at the company I've been with, I'm now in my 21st year, and I've been very consistent and very successful. But you, you've got to kind of show them the way. And I think a lot of people, and I'm preaching a little bit, and these are my views, but they mistake activity for progress.
Right.
Well, I did a demo. Well, so what?
Right.
Did you have to do it?
Right.
Did you have to do a demo?
I did a demo.
Could you have progressed the opportunity without doing a demo? Or I did a proof of value or proof of concept. Well, did you have to do that? What about having them talk to one of your successful accounts and avoid that? So again, quality over quantity. Are you progressing the opportunity? And where are you, in that overall cycle?
Yeah, because I see a lot of people doing what they know only because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
they do demos, they go through the steps, but are they doing it with the right people in the right way that does progress that decision within the enterprise?
That's right, Brian. I'm a big believer in not skipping steps. So you don't change your style. I'm a big believer in people should, if you feel like you're good at what you do, you have an aptitude for selling, you want to sell, you want to get better and learn at your craft, do it, and don't mistake process and steps in a sales cycle for style. Because a lot of people go, I'm not going to, they're trying to change me. Good managers don't want to change people, change styles. What they do want to make sure of, and I challenge myself selling, is don't skip steps. You know, that's key because that'll come back to haunt you.
Yes.
I mean, one of the big things I see, Brian, is that if you go too quickly and you skip steps and you are particularly product focused, oh, this account needs this, and this, these 5 or 6 things. Why? Because we always sell those 6 things. And you price it and you don't have the collaborative input back that they need those things. Guess what? You're going to be viewed as expensive,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, a little bit on my theory of selling.
And why did you go back to carrying a bag from being a manager?
Because that's what, honestly, that's what I truly love. I enjoyed managing and I felt like I was a good manager. There were aspects of managing, honestly, that I didn't particularly enjoy.
Yeah.
Uh, I remember people always asked me why. I said, I always had the Kleenex box on my desk. I guess there were some conversations that sometimes elicited some tears. But I love selling. My customers, to me, and this is going to sound really corny, but they're family.
Yeah.
When they celebrate success, I do too. When they hurt, I hurt. They know they can call me unless I'm sleeping 24 hours a day. And I tell my customers this: if you have a go live, I mean, you started in the same business I'm in. They had go lives at 1, 2 in the morning. I want to know about those go lives because they don't always go smoothly. And I have my phone on, and they know they can call me if they've got a problem.
Yeah.
Harken back to your question on differentiation. I don't know how many of my competitors do that. If they do that, good for them. But that's how I conduct my business.
And I'm sure you've seen a lot of good salespeople. What differentiated the very best from the good?
Focus. I'm big on focus. And again, for myself, I challenge myself on this because I can get defocused too.
It's easy.
And I have to sort of slap myself on the side of the head every now and again. But again, every time I talk to new hire classes, I said, no matter what you've been assigned, make sure you have kind of an ABC priority. Know what your A accounts are. And here goes the metric, but I tend to spend about 3/4 of my time in those A accounts. The other thing I'm a believer in is just because you get a couple of no's or you're not making a heck of a lot of progress in the first 6 months, don't necessarily drop them off your focus account list. And I think good salespeople or great salespeople from the good ones, they kind of understand that better than others. I always say they kind of smell where the opportunities are. They know how to attach themselves to the big problems of of an account. They do their research. They understand what the executive priorities are of that company and what the corporate initiatives, funded corporate initiatives are, and they attach themselves to those big problems. And I think those are the guys that are doing the multi-seven-figure deals that make them great.
Well, I like that, being able to smell the ones, I call that judgment,
Yes,
because you get a territory and you have whatever number of accounts, but there's only a tiny amount of them that are going to buy that year,
that's right.
especially if you're doing seven-figure deals. That might be probably less than 10, maybe less than 5, but you might have 50 or 100 accounts there. That judgment that you then focus on,
Mm-hmm.
you could pick the wrong 5 to focus on, but if you have good judgment skills, you'll be good at figuring those out. And that's where I think a good manager comes in. Why'd you pick that one? What makes you think that?
Yeah, and that's where the B accounts come in. So you've got to
Yeah.
have people have asked me, gosh, you've been at your company 20 years, now in your 21st year. What? I mean, why? I mean, how can you even do that, in our business? And I said, I've been consistent every year. Every quarter, I've had a few goose egg quarters over the course of 20 years. Don't get me wrong, but I've always had consistent years. And that's because of focus. It's those A accounts, but it's also the B accounts. Okay, so what I do at the beginning of every year is I call them seven-figure buddies. Those are the big things I've attached to. So I've got those, but I've got a lot of other deals that are, sort of, let's say 2 to 500,000 on average. And I focus on, that's the other 20, 30% of my time. Okay, so it's that balance there. And the C accounts are the ones that probably aren't at all this year, but you want to nurture. You may want to call, just check in. Brian, I can't tell you how many times I go into an office, an architect or somebody closes the door and says, Dean, we deal with X vendors, let's say, I don't know, 20, 30 vendors. You're one of the only ones that come and see us and check on us when you don't have a deal pending in the next 90 days.
Yeah.
And I thank them for that, because I try to do that. It's earning their trust. It's developing the account. And you need to do that as well.
And what does keep you at a company for 20 plus years? I mean, that's almost unheard of nowadays.
Well, I mean, it's part culture, some culture. I mean, you kind of make your own culture, but it's, I like the people I work with. I've historically liked our executive, the original founder of the company. I love. He happens to be the owner of the Sacramento Kings, now up north. You probably know the name. He was very dynamic. He was a very innovative guy. He really saw the future in 5-10 years ahead of things occurring. And so he was the one that you charged the hill with. And then, of course, the last 6+ years have been different. It's been part of a equity company, very interesting one, and very large one. So it's always something new, though. It's challenging, and I've been consistent. I mean, don't get me wrong. There've been on an occasion, people have courted me to move, but I always have that next big deal, and I'm like, wait a minute, how can I walk away from a large commission? And I know this is going to sound corny again, but I almost feel like I'm leaving my family. My customers are my family.
And
So,
when you sell the problem, dig into that for us, because this is a very different way of thinking, because the company doesn't teach us this. They teach us, here's what we do, why we're better, why they need to switch. They don't focus on the business problem that you solve.
Fear, need, envy is what I look at, right? People buy out of fear, need, or envy. And I look at those three elements relative to executive priorities. I do dig into that pretty heavily, Brian. I on my focus accounts, not every account, but on my focus accounts, I consistently listen to their earnings call. I want to know what they're talking about. I read through some of the annual report. I read 10Qs. I look for presentations. So you need to develop an understanding, and there's so much information available. Let me tell you another thing that I tell salespeople. If you go into a sales call and say, so tell me about your business.
Not nowadays, no.
Or who are your top 3 competitors?
What keeps you up at night?
Yeah, it's like, those are going to be short conversations. So do your homework, and I keep saying try to attach yourself to the big initiative, the big problem. And some companies don't teach that. They want to teach you about feature function and competitive feature function differentiated. By the way, this isn't true on all of our products, but if I ever got into a feature function war, I'd probably lose more of those than I'd win.
Yeah.
On the whole. But when I do my debriefs, and I occasionally lose, but I also debrief when I win. I'm always told the same thing. You understood us better than your competition. You took the time. The last one I won a few months ago, they told me it was almost you added time to our decision cycle, but we're glad you did, because we found out some things about what we were trying to do that we hadn't even thought of before.
Yeah.
And so my only closing thing on that is have some patience, dig into the research, dig into the problems, then align your product or service to that. I think you'll be in good shape.
And have you ever tried to go in line of business versus IT?
Yes, although honestly, we are more of a sort of a CIO down IT type sale. It's changing, Brian, where our products, particularly the last 5 to 7 years, because we sort of say we connect data, we manage data, and now we analyze and help companies become more predictive in how they look at their information and ultimately have better outcomes.
Yeah.
That's starting to change. So I'm having more conversations with line of business than say I had 10 or 15 years ago, for sure.
Well, that's it, because most of the money is drifting to line of business.
No question.
They're saying that even marketing has more IT money than IT does.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I see a big shift out to the and cloud is driving a lot of that.
Driving a ton of it,
Because now, no matter what cloud service you're using, they give you metrics on who's spending what, which for many CIOs has been almost alarming, because now they can say, okay, Mr. XYZ department, you have spent X amount this month. And it's almost shocking to the individual department heads. And it's interesting. I mean, the cloud guys won't like me for saying this, but it's almost like, whoa, we thought cloud was going to be less expensive. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And why do you focus on the bigger deals? Is it just more fun? Because they're not easy.
It was the only one. That's starting to change, by the way, because as our business moves more and more from a perpetual license model and annual maintenance to subscription, largely because the valuation of companies are more highly valued in a subscription
Yeah.
model. But the types of quotas that were assigned, there is no way I could achieve the types of numbers without having at least one or multiple seven-figure deals. I just couldn't make it selling solely what I would call my B transactions.
And how would you judge your technical skills? Because in selling technology, there's people on the spectrum. I used to say there's the ones that are engineers in suits, and then there's the ones that have an engineer next to their suit. And which one, or where are you on that spectrum?
I judge myself, and again, I say that I keep talking because I do a lot of speeches to our new hire classes, and I have pretty consistently now for a lot of years. It's not okay, in my opinion, for a salesperson to say, you know what, I don't know that, I don't really understand it, and I've got to bring in my tech for that. That I don't like.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to code. I've done a couple of Fortran programs. That dates how old I am. But I understand our products, generally understand them. I can sit there and have an initial 30, 40,000 foot level with a developer or a technical person. Beyond that, I would bring in a solutions consultant with me.
Yeah. And how do you separate yourself from the competitors? Because you're in a hyper competitive space.
In terms of my technical skills, or
No. Well, I mean, you compete against everything from free to the big boys. There's lots of ways of solving the problem.
well, I always say there's no free lunch.
Yeah.
There's things you have to look at. As an example, I don't want to get too technical, but with things like pure open source, which has been coming on strong the last 3 to 5 years, but there are trade-offs with that too.
Everything, yeah.
Everything's got a trade-off, and so you have to understand what those trade-offs are. You have to again come back to what they're trying to solve. And you've got to position yourself properly, sometimes in combination with competitors.
Right.
And I'm working more and more with partners.
Yeah.
This is not necessarily a go solo sale anymore like it was 20 years ago. So I work with the large Indian SIs all the way to the large consulting firms, boutique consulting firms, what have you.
And what would you characterize as your superpower as a sales rep?
I think the big one, and I've done some work with personal branding with a friend of mine, is what always comes back is trust.
Yeah.
Is they know, my customers and prospects know that they can trust me. They know that if I commit something, I do it, and I do it on time. And if they select my competitor, now my competitor may be the same way as I am. I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of really good competitors out there, and I respect them all. And by the way, I never mention a competitor by name ever.
That's smart.
In a competitive cycle, nor do I mention any of our product names. But if I lose a deal, and occasionally I do, they're not going to get me. That's the way I view it. I say, you know what? I wish them well. I never say, oh, and by the way, you didn't get me. No. But internally, I say that because I know I kind of bleed for my customers, and they know that.
Yeah. And what motivates you more, the hatred of losing or the love of winning?
I knew you were going to ask me that question. And you always say it can't be both. And I always think
which one's more? Of course, everyone's got both, but both
Yeah.
tells me you're not thinking about it.
This sounds probably a little bit conceited. I never think about losing.
No.
When I'm in fully engaged, I'm in a cycle. I always think about winning and making sure I'm doing everything I can to make sure that customer selects the right solution. I'm passionate about what I do, and I always feel it's my solution and my company and my service and everything I bring to the table. So what motivates me more, personally, I think it's winning. Because I don't think about losing. Having said that, I think general fear has always been a motivation of mine. Fear of losing my job, as an example.
After 21 years. Yeah.
Well, not so much now. Not so much now. I mean, I think I'm pretty well respected at my company all the way up to our CEO and throughout the executive rank. But early on, sure.
Yeah.
If I don't carry my weight here substantially, I could lose my job. So fear is always a motivator of mine, for sure.
And are you ever shocked? Because when you do lose, is it something that you're like, at what stage are you shocked? I mean, because let's say you get the technical win, you've got the business, you think you have the business when you think it's moving into legal and procurement.
Yeah.
Are you ever really surprised if you lost?
You probably think you are, but you really shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be. I don't care what system you use to process how you approach a sale. I've been trained on almost every sales process known to mankind, starting with Miller Hyman. I mean, I take things from all of them. I listen to you religiously, others. I'm a big believer in force management and medic, and I kind of adopt all of that. And if you get that call, and we've all got it. I mean, when I was managing, Brian, one of the big things I asked in my interview is, describe for me your most recent loss. And if somebody interviewing could not describe a loss within the last 12 to 24 months, I did not hire that person, because they're not competing enough.
Or they're not learning.
And not learning enough. And so yeah, it's, I debrief, I demand a debrief.
That's smart.
For your people watching your show, if they lose a deal and they don't demand a personal debrief with one or more people, you're missing an opportunity. So I do that. I go back and I go, you know what? Based on what they told me, I missed that.
And do you feel you get the truth in a debrief?
Not always.
Yeah.
I
I think people hate delivering bad news. There's nothing in it for them, right?
They always hate delivering it to me because normally they like me.
Yeah.
Most people like me. That's not universally true, but generally, even the ones I lose, they'll feel badly about delivering the news. It's never price.
That's it. When you hear price, it's never price.
No.
I mean, if they can afford it long before you make the first call.
I know you came out of because I know you ran a very large team selling like gateway type products, API management, gateway technology. We sell one of those, and I lost one of those actually in a customer. You would think, gee, you wouldn't lose something like that with a customer, and I could not pull out of them the real reasons. As hard as I tried, I couldn't figure it out, and they wouldn't give it up.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just they liked the product, or they liked or they lazy. or, they were in a rush and then they flipped the coin.
Yeah.
Sometimes, we think it's a spreadsheet and there's this one feature or this one step you missed, but sometimes, the other person called after you hung up, right? Or you would
Yeah,
think
you kind of you know when it's not going well.
you should. Yeah, that sense, that
You know, when you're
sniff
at
test.
when you've been on the dance floor and all of a sudden you're in the corner and the music is become very faint.
There's no chair.
There's no chair. You're heading down the wrong path. And of course, all good salespeople want to avoid that. We do everything we can to avoid it.
Cool. Hey, Dean, I really appreciate this time. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks again for the time. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest thing, and my last name is spelled just like a hot dog. I always tell people Wiener, Wiener, and that's probably the best place to get me.